It's time for Political Buzz, the television forum to discuss politics and issues of interest for all of Western New York. Now, from the WBBZ television studio at the Eastern Hills Mall, this is Political Buzz.
Welcome to Political Buzz. I'm Phil Arno. Recently, Republican candidate for Governor Rob Astorino spoke at a rally in Niagara Square. Just a few hundred were in attendance there. Those that were very passionate about everything from high taxes to the SAFE Act. John DeSciullo was there and talked to Astorino.
Oh, his ads against me are completely and utterly false. And it's meant, I think, to hide what's going on with him right now. You've got the U.S. Attorney, federal prosecutors, looking into Andrew Cuomo for criminal activity and corruption. And that's dogging him. That's why he's not speaking to the press. He's avoiding the public. He won't debate because his criminal defense attorneys are telling him not to speak, that he could perjure himself. So, you know, he owes it to the people of Western New York and all of New York to speak, because he's got to defend his record, which is abysmal. More people are leaving this state, 400,000 in the last 3.5 years under this governor. Jobs are fleeing, people are fleeing, taxes are sky high. You know, that's not the record we should be proud of, and that certainly doesn't deserve another term. But what we did in Westchester, we would do for Western New York and all of New York. Bring good jobs back, lower taxes so people can breathe and stay in their home, and the middle class can flourish, and the working poor can move up. That's what we need to do.
How aggressive are you going to be in the campaign moving forward with just a few months left?
Well, the campaign really starts in earnest now, post-Labor Day. So people are going to hear from us in the next 59 days of what we're going to do, why Cuomo does not deserve a second term, that he is under investigation by federal prosecutors for corruption charges. And you know what? People are going to understand that there's a better way, that there's a much better outlook for this state and a greater future. But we got to change governors. We got to change policies coming out of Albany in order for us to do that.
How are you doing financially? And I know you've talked to people. I just heard you on the radio, in fact, before this rally, talking about people going to your website to make donations. How is that going? I mean, admittedly, you certainly need the funds to make the election strong.
Yeah, no, we're never going to outraise Andrew Cuomo. He had 3.5-year head start. A lot of it is dirty money from pay to play. Plus, he's using $200 million in tax dollars on a phony and fraudulent campaign called Startup New York. But you know what? We're raising enough money. People are coming to our cause in little checks, and a lot of people doing that. And I'm proud of the grassroots effort, because that's what's going to win the race. Not a $50,000 corporate check from someone in New York City for Andrew Cuomo. It's the thousands of people from upstate and Western New York that are writing checks to our campaign. That's going to make the difference, because they're going to vote.
Now, while Astorino is a good candidate, he faces an entrenched Democrat incumbent in a Democrat-dominated state. Joining me now is Erie County Republican Party Chairman Nick Langworthy. We should note that we invited Erie County Democratic Chairman Jeremy Zellner to take part in this discussion. He decided not to. Nick?
Thanks for having me, Phil.
It's going to be an interesting season coming up. A lot of very interesting races, a lot of behind-the-scenes politics going on. Rob Astorino is, as I said, he's facing an incumbent in a state that's dominated by Democrats. How do you proceed? How do you put the best face on that campaign when the odds are against him?
Well, if you look at any election where you're outnumbered, you know, you could have that defeatist attitude. I think people have had enough of what Albany has passed down to us, even here in Western New York, especially here in Western New York and across upstate New York. You know, just look here in Erie County. We're down 2-to-1 in enrollment as Republicans. There's nearly 300,000 Democrats, nearly 150,000 Republicans. Yet we have elected and re-elected a county controller, Stefan Mihailu. We've elected the first Republican county clerk in 40 years, Chris Jacobs. We've elected 3 times a Republican sheriff, Tim Howard. And we have a Republican majority in the Erie County legislature for the first time since the late 70s. So people are smarter than just their party affiliation in writing, you know, that one line on the ballot. They'll decide who is the better of the two candidates and make that switch across party lines to vote for them.
Well, that's Western New York, and I think he has a fair chance in Western New York of getting the majority of votes. The state is so, you know, top-heavy when it comes to Democrat voters down in the New York City area. can anything be done to penetrate that, to kind of get the message to those people? You know, I'm sure Cuomo has an advantage in fundraising, and you've seen the ads on the air. And by the way, when you see an attack ad, when you see an ad saying what a crook or what a bad guy the candidate is, what that tells me is there's not a lot of issues that he can run on, that Cuomo can run on. He's just trying to have personal attacks.
The governor doesn't even put his own name on the attack ads that he puts out for against Rob Astorino, and he's certainly going to outspend Rob Astorino in this race, as we heard in a clip earlier from Rob. And that, you know, money is a very important factor, but we don't have to spend dollar for dollar with Andrew Cuomo. If that was the case, you know, this election would have been over long ago. But you have to ask yourself, why did the governor come out so violently against Rob Astorino's candidacy back in May? Television commercials have been running right here in the Buffalo media market since May, trying to tear down the candidacy of Rob Astorino. Yet you don't see the numbers really shifting wildly towards Governor Cuomo. I do believe that the governor has a real problem. People are not satisfied with the direction of state government. They still feel the crushing taxes. We still have a population flight. And despite some progress in the city of Buffalo that's been long coming, that isn't just the responsibility of Governor Cuomo, you know, we really need a tax structure that works for all New Yorkers. We need an economic development policy that doesn't have an expiration date like the gimmicky program Startup New York has. We need a lower tax structure, we need less burdensome regulations, and we need a state that's livable again.
Well, this is, so far, everything that's gone on is like the pregame show. Now, after the primaries, after, you know, Labor Day, we're going to get into the heart of it. What's going to change? Is everything just going to be stepped up, or do you think the priorities are going to change in terms of the message?
I think what you have is, before Labor Day, the only ones really paying attention are the insiders, or people that really follow politics. What you had last week with the primary should be seen as a humiliation to Governor Cuomo. He lost nearly half of the counties in New York State against an opponent who no one knew and only had a couple $100,000, while the governor was spending millions of dollars getting his vote out and delivering his voters to the polls. That is a tremendous defeat for the governor to have his underfunded opponent get so many votes. And really, he only won Western New York by the coattails of Kathy Hochul as running mate. So I think really as we go, now we're past primary day, we have the general election matchup, you're going to see much more laser focus by the Astorino campaign and the Republican committee and a lot of the other groups that are working hard to change governors in this state and elect Republicans down ballot. You're going to see much more emphasis on this upcoming election and getting that vote out.
Okay. All right, that's it for this segment. Next, how much can gun owners upset about the SAFE Act influence this election? Welcome back to our discussion with Nick Langworthy. Nick, the SAFE Act, it has really fired passion throughout the state. I'm not sure what the statistics are, but I would venture to guess that the vast majority of New Yorkers, certainly outside of New York City, own firearms. Everybody in the country is really in favor of the Second Amendment. It's by far dominated by people who are pro-Second Amendment. Andrew Cuomo came out and basically just said that everybody who's a gun owner is a nut. And basically, he even said there's no room in New York State for people like that. Does that message, resonate? I know there are certain gun owners that are extremely passionate about shooting, but then there are the people who they have their rifle in the closet, or they have a gun, but they don't think about it a lot. How much is that going to influence this election? I have not seen an issue mobilize people to get involved for the first time like Governor Cuomo's hammering through the SAFE Act in the dead of night and really running roughshod over the entire state legislature, who rolled over very quietly. We had a few passionate voices, but they were
dominated by Sheldon Silver, and even our downstate Republicans turned their back on us on the issues of the SAFE Act. We have made a statement here with the local Republican Party that we are strongly for the Second Amendment and have fought hard for candidates that were against the SAFE Act. That has led that treachery, really, trampling on our constitutional rights is what the governor did. And that has led many people, for the first time ever, to fill out a voter registration card, to come in and volunteer on a campaign, to put signs in their lawn, to ask their neighbors to get involved. And you're seeing that first-time advocacy. None of this is going to register in public opinion polls because these people maybe haven't ever voted before. Maybe they never thought it was important. But when they saw the governor come in and try to tell them what they can do with their private property in their homes and trampling on their constitutional rights as given to us by our founding fathers, they have gotten involved, and they're going to make a massive difference this year on November 4th.
Well, the way it was done, the way it was shoved through in the wake of the tragic shooting of school children, it's basically a situation where Cuomo saw an opportunity, a tragedy with high emotions, and decided he was going to capitalize on that to pass a law that would never go away, that would basically take away one of our basic rights, and it just rode on the passion of the day. Those are the types of things that are maybe the worst abilities of government to take away rights under those circumstances. I mean, I don't know what to say about how it's going to influence the election, but just in general, a leader like that, it needs to be kind of closely looked at, how somebody would run something through like that.
The governor's a tyrant. I mean, that is not news to many in political circles. I mean, the governor wants to run the state like a dictatorship, and that's what he did when he hammered through the SAFE Act. And unfortunately, he had a lot of co-conspirators in that effort. This had more to do with Andrew Cuomo's presidential aspirations than it did good public policy. Not one of us is safer today because of the New York SAFE Act. In fact, it's just taken law-abiding citizens that are enjoying their Second Amendment rights and made them criminals. And we've had some great people in Western New York stand up strong against the governor, people like Dave DiPietro, our county clerk, Chris Jacobs, who stood up to the Buffalo News and says, no, you cannot print the information of pistol permit holders, as he's the depository of that information. We've had people like Sheriff Tim Howard, much of his election was based on the SAFE Act last year, and his willingness to stand up to the governor and say, no, I won't enforce your stupid law. And we need more people to get off the couch, get involved, and help us make that difference in New York State government. And you can change your government, you can change your governor if we get enough people to the polls that care about the issues. Studies show there's maybe 6 million gun owners in the state of New York out of roughly 19 million residents. If every one of those enrolled to vote this year, we would have a change in the governor's mansion.
Well, that's a very specific issue, and people will vote because of that issue. What has troubled me for a long time, and what I've always thought about, ever since I was in college, is that people go to the polls and they vote. And I would say a majority, and I'm not sure if I'm right or not, but I would say a majority of people vote because their uncle was a Democrat, or their father was a Republican, or it's not an issue thing, it's a social thing. They belong to a union, so they've got to vote Democrat because, quote unquote, that's good for the union. But do they look into issues? And I'm not sure, you probably in your business, you run into getting people to vote and giving them a reason to vote. How much do the issues count in a vote like this?
The issues definitely matter. I mean, we have proven here in our backyard that we can present candidates, excellent candidates, with an excellent message that can pull votes across the aisle. Other areas of the state, I don't know that has happened, or the country for that matter. Many times people choose to make their enrollment when they first register to vote based on what their parents were, or what their relatives were, or what they heard at work or at school. but we're trying to, you know, blur those lines and present candidates that don't just run on a strict partisan message, that really present a taxpayer-centric message. And, you know, a lot of times County Executive Mark Poloncarz takes great umbrage when I and other Republicans say that we fight for taxpayers. Because he says he represents more than just taxpayers, but really, you know, we have to have the backs of the people that are paying the bills in this community. And having that taxpayer-centric message, I think oftentimes will lead people to say that, you know, there's a better way than just riding a partisan line because that's what my voter registration card says.
Well, you know, for example, in Western New York, you know, just basically going to what I just said and what you've talked about, I don't think Buffalo has had a Republican mayor since the 1950s. And probably since the 1950s, the city has gone down, I mean, substantially in terms of economics, in terms of the businesses that have moved out. Part of that is being in New York State. But still, and this is nothing against Byron Brown. I like Byron. I don't know, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10 how to rate him in terms of his performance. But the consistency of a Democrat after a Democrat after a Democrat, and if you're running for mayor of Buffalo as a Republican, you know, it's just, you know, wave and say hello and then disappear.
It's incredibly hard. When you look at the city of Buffalo, the enrollment is so wildly in one way. It's 7-to-1 Democrat to Republican. To give you an example, New York City, who everyone thinks is the most Democratic place in the country, is 6-to-1 Democrat to Republican. So the city of Buffalo is more Democratic proportionally than the city of New York. Our prospects to elect a Republican mayor are pretty slim unless we have, you know, someone of the financial wherewithal of a Mike Bloomberg that would spend, you know, tens of millions of dollars of their own money to try to win that election. I think the likelihood of electing a Republican mayor is very slim. You know, maybe nonpartisan elections would serve the taxpayers in the city of Buffalo better than the current system where it's all decided on primary day. You know, we had a candidate on the Republican line, you know, last year. They performed admirably. They gave a choice. And that's what's important, that we are trying everywhere as the Erie County Republicans are trying to create two-party government where it doesn't exist. Electing Republicans to serve on town boards, city councils, town supervisor's office, and giving the voters a real choice.
There's some inside politics that we may have just a few minutes here to talk about. The Grisani race. The last few days of that race for the 60th district, the teachers union came out and spent like $300,000 for Grisani's opponent in the primary because they thought that Grisani was a better candidate. And that's very convoluted. I mean, you know, the Democrats spending ads on ads for a Republican because they want the stronger Republican to lose. Does that go on all the time?
I can't say that I have seen this level of investment that we saw out of the New York State United Teachers. I think it's wrong. I did not make an endorsement in that race. We sat on the sidelines, let the voters decide. And then at the very end, the New York State United Teachers come in and spend $300,000 over 10 days. The only thing I'll say is I'll challenge that every teacher in Western New York should ask their union steward, where does my money go? If they're advocating for positions that the union doesn't even believe in, that's disingenuous. It's a lie that perpetuated on the voters of this community, and it's wrong. Let their money go towards their endorsed candidate. In that case, it was Mark Panapento, the candidate they've endorsed for the general election. So they were very disingenuous in their investment against Senator Grisanti. And, you know, a lot of people disagreed with Senator Grisanti, and I think he very well could have lost that primary without their investment. But it certainly finished the job.
Well, politics certainly is a contact sport here in Western New York. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the behind-the-scenes gamesmanship that goes on. Some interesting things coming up.
Recently, lawmakers and elected officials came to the WBBZ-TV studio at the request of the Clarence Chamber of Commerce to answer questions from the general public and those in the organization. Phil Arno from WBBZ-TV caught up with New York State Senator Michael Ransenhofer for his comment on whether television commercials that Governor Andrew Cuomo appears in touting tax advantages of doing business in New York State are legitimate or just a political platform for future advancement.
I also see ads on our local television encouraging us to come to other states to do business in that state. So I don't think it's unusual for a state to spend some money to try to entice out-of-state businesses into the state. The question that you raise of, whether or not this is a misappropriation of funds, or whether or not, the intent behind this is for the governor to run for higher office. Look, the facts will be what the facts are, and people will do a comparison between, what the ads say and what the raters say in terms of where we are in terms of tax structure. My focus is really to try to lower the tax structure in the state so we really do have a more business-friendly climate, which will entice not only our people that are here to stay and start a business, but to entice people who know that you're just not going to come here because of the carrot, the incentive, but because we have a lower cost business structure, which I think that's where the focus really has to be.
Welcome back. What we were talking about there, Nick, is I was in Florida recently, I was in California recently, and all across the country you see these ads for Startup New York. And these ads talk about how well New York is doing for business. Now, if you're a businessman out there in Oklahoma or in Texas or anywhere in the country, and you see one of those ads, you're going to kind of scratch your head and say, gee, I didn't know New York was doing so well. And if you're thinking about moving your business and you would consider New York, you're going to go on the internet, and you're going to do all the research that you can do, and you're going to find out that New York is number 49 or 50 in almost every category for business. It's one of the worst states in the union for business. So any businessman is going to see one of those ads and really isn't going to be influenced to come here to New York. So why spend $150 million on those ads? Well, the people who aren't business people, who are sitting there in their living room and they see that ad and they're thinking the same thing. They're saying, gee, I didn't know that New York was doing so well. Governor Cuomo, okay, he's associated with New York. So they're not going to do the research. And if Cuomo runs for president in a couple of years, he's got all those voters out in the country who's seen those ads, and in the back of their minds they're thinking, well, he did a great job with New York. He made it a business-friendly state. So isn't that really just what it is a political ad for Andrew Cuomo? It's
a gimmick. It's a policy that isn't sustainable. You have Startup New York, where you give incentives to businesses to come in here, and they're tax-free for 10 years. Well, one, that creates an unfair level playing field for businesses that have struggled to exist in this tough climate for any business to succeed in New York State. So you're creating competition for existing businesses. I don't have any problem with them, hiring and investing, people to go out there and entice businesses to come in, but do it in a genuine way. I mean, just because someone saw an ad on the Today Show doesn't mean that they're going to move their business, pull up stakes, and come to town. Send out the headhunters and the people that are professionals at doing this job. Make a real economic development policy. Make it a friendly place to do business. Yeah. But just one last point, why are the ads running here? Right. If this isn't about politics and making the governor feel good about himself and making us believe that this state is a great state to do business in, why are we running ads in the community that the businesses already exist in? They should be out of state, not in state.
Well, if those ads, which, by the way, they spent at last count $150 million on, and it's taxpayer money. It was funds that were earmarked for lowering utility bills for the poor and for assisting the hurricane or tropical storm victims down in New York City. That money was spent, if it had been spent for attracting tourists to New York, I could see that. I mean, come to New York, visit Niagara Falls, go to New York City, go to the Adirondacks, but Andrew Cuomo didn't invent New York, the Niagara Falls.
Right.
So it just doesn't do him that much good. I think it's a political ad. I think it's basically taking money from the state and the people that need it, and it's just you know, allocating it for political purposes.
For the governor to say that that's not a political ad is a lie. Yeah. Just a blatant lie.
Well, we're out of time now. That's it for Political Buzz. Join us next week, and we'll continue this discussion. Very interesting things going on.